Hello, and thank you for watching Career Conversations. I'm your host, Unica Walcott, and today's guest is Sylvester Placid. He is a communication strategist at NASA. Welcome, Sylvester. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, Unica.
All right, so I won't, beat around the bush. Let's jump right into questions. My first question is, what does your family think you do when you tell them that you're a communication strategist at NASA?
So I think my family is probably the most excited about the last part, which is that I work for NASA. They know, my parents know kind of generally what I do, which is I do a lot of internal and external communications for NASA, which is a long way of saying that I do my best to make sure that people's stories are told in an exciting way. But the rest of my family, they just see that I am now part of the NASA family as a contractor. I'm still a NASA employee, although not fully federal quite yet. But it's exciting for them to know that I'm part of an organization like NASA that's known around the world.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. So what was your first reaction when you learned you got the opportunity at NASA?
I couldn't believe it. I've wanted to work for NASA for a long time since I was a little kid. And it never quite works out the way that you think that it's going to. Of course, I wanted to be an astronaut, and like every little kid, and I didn't have the math scores to be able to do that. But luckily, I feel like I'm pretty good with words rather than numbers, and that's how I was able to get into NASA. And so it's been nice to be able to do something that I feel like I'm do well at professionally in my career, while also doing it for an organization that I care a lot about.
That's awesome. So I think sometimes people think about STEM and they think about, well, you got to be good at the science and the numbers. And I think that's vitally important, but so is the communications piece. So I super relate to that as somebody who works in more of a communication side of the house for an engineering firm. So I get you on how important that is. So you said you work more on internal and external communications. Can you tell me a little bit more about what your day job is and what you actually do?
Yeah, so specifically, I work in the communications program, which is a program office within the NASA IT department. And what I do for them is that I try to raise the profile of the work that's done by this program across the agency, make sure that people know what we do, why it's important, make sure that we try to get the amount of funding that we need for the things that we do by raising awareness of what we do. And what we actually do is super important to the mission of NASA. So we actually provide all of the network communication endpoints and infrastructure for the agency. So what that means is all of the connectivity for the agency, wired and wireless, VPN, and a lot of the collaboration services that we use day to day, especially while we've been working from home, is done by my program. So it's taken on a lot of importance over the last 12 to 14 months that we've been working from home. And it's been a fun story to tell, especially when a lot of people didn't quite know who we were before a lot of these changes to how we telework and get our missions accomplished every day changed.
Oh, that's pretty cool. So you got to be more front and center in an organization that probably doesn't center communications as much, but going remote was definitely a major shift. What was like your favorite part of that transition as far as did your workload change or your tasks change any?
The workload increased quite a bit because now we took on a lot more importance within the agency, and it was important for us to get out in front of our customers and the people that we serve every day to tell them who we are, how they can get help, and come up with new ideas that we could implement to try to help them accomplish the new environment that they're in, where a lot of the folks that work at the agency, they're not used to working from home. We have scientists, we have researchers who aren't typically in their office at home. They're actually touching space hardware, or they're performing experiments. So there was a lot of having to shift about how we talk about things and anticipating how people were going to use the products that we provide a lot more than I expected when we first started 12 to 14 months ago.
That's really cool to be able to navigate such like a historic transition for an organization that's, sounds like very much a hands-on, face-to-face sort of organization in terms of the work that you do. How did you get into this role?
So I actually just applied. I'm a contractor, so I was able to get on the contract that performs this work for NASA here at Marshall Space Flight Center in Huntsville, Alabama. I just happened to apply, and I'm coming from about 8 to 10 years of experience in federal consulting and corporate communications. Just happened to get the call. Now I did have to follow up a couple of times just to make sure that they got my application and I was under consideration. But it was just one of those things that everything just lined up just right. The program that I'm working for was looking for somebody with my exact skill set at the
Oh,
exact
wow.
time that I was available to do it. So, a lot of it is you try really hard to make your cover letter perfect, to make your resume look great, but a lot of it does come down to just luck and timing. And this is just one of those things that seem to work out for me.
Oh, that's really cool. So just all the stars aligned and you ended up
They
at
did, they
NASA.
did, yeah.
That's really cool. So what did you want to be when you grew up? You said you've been doing this for about 10 years already.
Yeah, well, when I was first introduced to the communication field, I thought that I'd want to be a journalist. I thought that I'd want to, go to remote locations and file video reports and, be in some dangerous situations, and that would be fun. And I kind of started to get away from that a little bit just because things changed a lot when I was in college. The second year that I was in college was 9/11. And so that really kind of changed the news landscape, and I started to decide that maybe that wasn't the right fit for me. And then I thought that I would want to go more into advertising and PR, and I thought working on ads would be really cool to work at an agency. And I never had the opportunity to kind of get into an internship and go that route. And so I wasn't quite sure which way I really wanted to go. And so I just tried different experiences. I never said no to opportunities that came up to get some more experience. And, like you were saying, with the stars aligning, it just so happened that all the experiences that I collected through my career were exactly what NASA was looking for at the time that they were looking for me.
Wow, that's really cool. So can you tell me a little bit about some of those experiences that helped build your road to NASA?
Sure. So when I first started in the professional corporate world, I had just graduated from Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. And so when you go to work in Northern Virginia, as I'm sure you know, a
Mhm.
lot of it is government contracting. A lot of it is stuff that's not as exciting as going to work for a PR firm or an ad agency. But I learned a lot during my time up there about how federal agencies make decisions about how IT is procured and maintained, and how things are communicated about IT in different agencies. And I worked for some really interesting clients at the time, like the Patent and Trademark Office, the National Institutes of Health. And so it turned out, 10 years later, that these were agencies that are very similar in size and scope to NASA. So it was one of those things that at the time I was like, man, this is really boring working at some of these agencies doing some, project management work. It's not as exciting as being in New York on Madison Avenue, coming up with great ad campaigns. But looking back, I'm really fortunate to have had those experiences because it really ended up working out for me in the end.
Well, that's great. Yeah, I can imagine, responding to, I guess, RFPs maybe in your old role for
A
like
little bit
bids.
of that, yes, and a lot of PMO work, a lot of vendor management, a lot of requirements analysis, stuff that makes your eyes gloss over. But really, in my role now, I see how important it is, and I see that there are really critical things like going to Mars and sending rockets into space that can't be done unless you have all that stuff really locked down.
All right. And you mentioned PMO. I'm not familiar with this term. Can you educate me?
Yes, that's the project management office. So most agencies, both on the corporate side and the government side, will have some sort of PMO that's just making sure that the different projects in the organization are hitting the milestones that they need to hit.
Okay. No, that's helpful. Thank you for clearing that up. It's all about making sure the if we've got to hit 30% by this date, it's gotta be done, or we're in trouble and we're blowing money and losing steam.
Yeah, the budget part is really important when you're talking about billions of dollars for stuff that's going into space.
I can see that. Look, it's just a few $1 billion. It doesn't matter. No, it's very mission critical. That's so cool. So we talked a little bit about what you actually do, about your roadmap, sort of, kind of, to NASA that you didn't expect. What was the most difficult part in navigating those years? Like, how did you kind of work through the less than sexy jobs?
That was difficult because I really had to have faith and believe that there was going to be something that happens for me in the end that's, a little bit more of what I was looking for. And it's really hard when you're in that day-to-day grind, especially tough commutes, tough clients, tough managers. There's a lot of things that kind of weigh you down day to day that makes it hard for you to stay focused on where you're eventually trying to get. And what I realized was the things that end up working out for you are very rarely the way that you picture it. It'll be an opportunity that just comes up out of nowhere that I never would have thought that I would leave the DC area to come work for NASA in Huntsville, Alabama. Alabama is not a place that I have seeked out to want to come work or live, but you kind of just have to take things as they come and have faith that the things that are put in front of you are the things that are correct for you in that moment.
Yeah, so can you tell me a little bit more about the transition from DC to Alabama? I'm also a nomad. I lived in DC for a while and now I'm in Florida. What was that move like for you?
So I had lived in Atlanta before, and so I'm not completely unfamiliar with the South, but the Atlanta area is a little bit it's similar to DC in that it's very diverse and very cosmopolitan, but Huntsville is very unique in that it's kind of a mini Atlanta or a mini Nashville, I would say. There's people here from all over the world. A lot of them come to work for NASA. A lot of them come to work on other government contracts. There's a lot of exciting things happening in town. We have a new automotive plant that's just been built recently, a joint venture between Mazda and Toyota. So
wow.
There's a lot of smart scientists, engineers, researchers that are here. There's some biotech. And it's actually, I'm told it's the second highest concentration of PhDs in the country other than Washington, D.C. So,
wow.
Sometimes it can be a little intimidating when, you go to work and you're in a meeting and there's 10 people in the meeting and 5 of those people are PhDs. So you really have to be on your game. But it wasn't that difficult of a transition, I would say, because a lot of people have been moving here from DC and from Texas and from Seattle and other tech hubs. So there's a lot of like-minded people here that are working on similar things. So I do miss the food. I do miss the diversity with that. But the city's slowly starting to improve with that too. So it's slowly starting to become better in that respect.
That's really awesome. So you said you miss the food. I'm nosy. What's your favorite kind of
do.
food?
Oh, I can't pick just
You
one.
can't pick.
You got
Okay, so
no. I miss.
give me your top 3. What is it you gotta have? Like if they said there's no food left on earth, you can only have these 3 things. What are they?
Number one, I have to say kava. I miss kava. I miss having that fresh Mediterranean. If you're not familiar with it, it's similar to Chipotle, but it's Mediterranean flavors. Now there's one in Nashville and they're building some in Atlanta, so we're not too far from it.
Okay.
Number 2, for sure, I would say Trader Joe's. Miss having a Trader Joe's around, but there is one coming to Huntsville at the end of this year. And the great
Really?
part about that is, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
No, I'm just like Trader Joe's is like a cult, so I get it. Like
It is. But the great part about that is that you can go to the store and you can get a little bit of Thai food, a little bit of Chinese food, a little bit of Indian food. So it kind of hits all those points. But yeah, I do have to say number one, and of course it's my own unique heritage too. But I miss having some good Indian restaurants in town. That's one area where it's still not quite where it should be. So Atlanta is a good substitute, but
it is.
you go to DC and there's just, there's great Indian buffets and Indian restaurants, on almost every corner. So I do miss having those options.
Yeah, I've got a favorite in Maryland. Royal Taj is so good. It's like one of my faves. So I get you on Indian food. I'm also very spoiled.
Yes.
One of my best friends growing up, her family's from Bangladesh. So her mom
Okay.
used to cook, and so so when I go to restaurants, I'm like, this is watered down. I know what it should taste like.
Right.
It's much more
Exactly.
spicy, it's much more flavorful. So you just kind of get annoyed.
You have to order off menu to get that homemade experience.
Yes, you gotta go look. Let me tell you, we're gonna do like this because I understand how it really goes, but you have to, when you're serving restaurant food, a massive palace, and some stuff's just gonna be too much.
That's true. That's the issue.
but I love it. It's one of my faves. But yeah, I have like a foodie sort of problem too.
I
So
wouldn't call it a
kava,
problem, not at all.
well, true, probably not a problem. So you like kava, which is kind of the Mediterranean version of Chipotle. You're a Trader
Yes.
Joe's fanatic, and
Yep.
you really miss like good home cooking, which is
Yes, home
for you.
cooking. I think that's really what that's saying. Because my parents don't live here; they live overseas right now. So that's really what I'm saying is that I really miss my mom's cooking.
Oh yeah, there's nothing like when your mom makes it too. Like you can go restaurant, but it's nothing like home. So do
That's
you get to
exactly
visit
right.
home often?
I usually, so they live in Singapore, so I usually go back once a year, or they come to visit me once a year. The last time they were here was the end of 2019, right before the COVID pandemic hit, and so I actually have not seen them since the pandemic started. So
Oh my God.
that was the best Indian food I had in Huntsville was when my mom was visiting me.
Oh, look, hopefully this will be over soon and mom can come visit and make some more
I'm
delicious
hoping
food.
so. I'm
Oh my
hoping so.
God.
I'm hoping that happens this year.
Me too. Oh my gosh. Like this has been like this year's felt like two. Some of us go as maybe five,
Yes,
but
yes.
but
You
I
can
mean we
tell by
can't.
the amount of new gray hairs that I have.
Oh, I got some here too. Like, okay, like hair dye, maybe, yes. Not really comfortable going to the salon
I'm not
yet.
ready for that. Not ready for that.
I mean, but I feel like with men, you get a pass. Like women, they're like, okay, you got to do something with that.
No, I'm staying salt and pepper, just so you know.
Noted, noted. Okay, so um, did we talk about what you wanted to be when you were growing up? You said briefly you wanted to be an astronaut.
I did. I want to be an astronaut, and then I came back to Earth when my math scores weren't quite what they should be, and I felt that I did okay with writing. I always enjoyed writing. I always enjoyed telling stories, writing stories. So that's how I got into communication, and so it kind of just went from there.
Okay, well that's really cool. So you said, look, let's pivot. If I can't do this, I'm going to do something related to it. That's really smart and insightful. A lot of young people kind of just go, okay, I give up and go whichever way the wind blows. But you made a really conscious decision to figure out what your next move was. I admire that.
Thank you.
So, what advice would you give somebody interested in becoming a communication strategist, say at NASA or really anywhere? Because communication strategists are part of a multitude of organizations.
Yeah, so with communication strategy, it's a little bit different than just being a communication specialist or, a communications manager. The strategy part is really, really understanding who your audience is, what your key messages are going to be, how are you going to reach those people, what channels are you going to use, what tactics are you going to use, and more importantly than all of that, what is it that you're trying to accomplish? Are you trying to get them to understand something better? Are you trying to get them to maybe not understand something as well as they might already, and kind of shift or kind of pivot their understanding of that? So you have to map out the strategy, and it has to be a multi-year type of thing. It can't just be something that you do for, this is my strategy for the next 6 months or the next year, because by the time you actually implement that strategy, it's going to be out of date. So it's a real balance that you have to try to strike between where do we want to be 5 years from now, not knowing that, for example, when I first started this strategy in 2018, I did not know that in 2020 there would be a global pandemic and that we would all be working from home. But at the same time, if you have a flexible enough strategy, you can understand that you can work in things to make it flexible and adaptable so you don't have to throw it all out and start from scratch. So I would say to somebody who's thinking about becoming a communication strategist, it's really vitally important for you to understand who's your audience, who are you trying to reach, how are you trying to reach them, why are you trying to reach them, and what plans and milestones can you put in place that will last you at least the next 3 years so that you have something to build on.
Okay, so one of the things you mentioned earlier was multiple channels. For people who are not in communications, what does that mean?
Multiple channels, or a channel is basically a way of reaching somebody. So right now we're reaching you through a live video or a recorded interview. You can reach somebody through an email. You can reach somebody through a text message. It's just different methods that people have of communicating with each other. And in order to be an effective strategist, you should have multiple different channels in your toolbox so that you can kind of pick and choose and decide which is the right channel to reach the right audience at that particular time.
That makes sense. So at NASA, you mentioned multiple channels. For your external audience, are you guys using social media? And if so, how?
So I'm not on the external side of the house,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of social media properties that NASA is very active on, particularly for STEM engagement. But Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. We do a lot of stuff on YouTube. We do a lot of stuff on TikTok now. But internally within NASA, there's different channels that we use as well. For example, if email is down, we can't send an email to send you to update you on the fact that email is down. So we have the capability to send, for example, a text message to our employees and personnel to say, hey, email's down right now. We're working on the issue. Should be back up within the next couple of hours. So you should always have multiple different ways of being able to reach people, precisely because if one goes down, you don't want to be stuck. You don't want to be out of luck and not be able to reach the personnel that you need to reach.
Oh, that's really smart. So I don't think people think about strategy from the standpoint of multiple channels from the viewpoint of kind of backup for technology issues. I think a lot of times we think about it, okay, in terms of targeting, like, okay, I'm trying to reach this group of people and they're generally on Instagram, or they might answer a text more likely than an email. But like, I think that's a really, really insightful perspective that you also need to think about strategy from the standpoint of, do my channels even work right now?
Are my channels even up and working, and are the right people that I'm trying to reach on those channels? For example, when we do video chats or we do phone calls within NASA, we don't ever just use one type of system. We have WebEx, we have Microsoft Teams, we have a couple of different ones, and that can, have some challenges sometimes because people are confused. Okay, what tool do I use for what purpose? And so we have to kind of help drive that conversation and steer people towards the right solutions for what they need. But at the same time, the big lesson over the last year has been, you can only imagine if we only have one platform or one channel to use and everybody's working from home and that's not working because everybody else in the world is on it, that we would be really out of luck. So I think having multiple options to use has always been a good backup plan for us, and we'll continue to do that.
Smart moves. I like it. So have a backup plan and make sure that you've got multiple channels to reach your audiences with the appropriate messages. Um, you've talked about what it takes to become a communication strategist and really understanding how the space works. What did you wish you knew before you started on this career path?
That's a really good question, because I'm looking back on it now, and I think the perception of NASA from the outside is that it's a really cutting edge organization that does a lot of great things really quickly. But the reality is that it's still a government organization that's very cautious, and is
Mm,
not an organization that is wanting to take risks very often. And so I kind of understood that coming in, but I didn't understand it as much as I wish that I did.
yeah.
So it's not a place where you come in and think that you're going to immediately start making a lot of changes right off the bat. A lot of my expectations were set by a lot of the great people that I work with that have been there for many, many years. One of the customers I work most closely with has been there since she was a co-op. A co-op is the
Wow.
old NASA name for intern. So she started her career as an intern, and moved her way up, and she's been there about 30 years. And
Wow.
one of my close friends that works there, who's also a customer, told me, a lot of people think that NASA is like the rocket ship, but it's really the barge that carries the rocket ship. And the barge is only going, 5-10 miles an hour, really slowly down the river, and it takes a long time to turn and adapt. And once I understood that that's the way that the organization operates, because it needs to be cautious, it needs to not take too many risks, that's how I really started to understand, okay, if I want to implement a change, if I want to anticipate what changes are coming, we're not talking about months. We're talking about, it could be years, it could be a matter of years. So that really helped set my expectations for how quickly things are going to happen. And if I knew that coming in, then I think, probably a little bit of I wouldn't say frustration, but definitely a little bit of the surprise. It wouldn't have caught me so off guard the first couple of months I was here.
Okay, well that's super insightful. I do feel like like you said, the perception is NASA rocket ship sort of thing. You're saying, look, this is more like the barge that's going down the river with the ship on it, and we've got to keep everything in good order, and it's going to go 5 miles an hour, and it's not going to be exciting, and you're not going to wave your hands like a roller coaster, but we'll get there.
That's exactly right. The last part there is the most important, Unica, because sometimes it can just feel like this is taking forever. I don't know when we're going to get there. But a lot of the missions that you see and hear about that are so exciting to watch are things that, may have started 5, 10, 15 years ago. It might have been, as you said, an RFP 20 years ago to send Mars Perseverance to the surface of Mars with the helicopter attached to it. That was just an idea, 15, 20 years ago. And this last spring, it was something that we all watched from home, and were amazed and excited by it. So it's really helped me learn the value of taking your time to get things right, and patience, and understanding that, yes, you will eventually get there. It'll probably be slower than you're expecting, but you'll get there.
So getting there, what does that feel like, and what does that look like for you in this particular role?
Well, I can give you an example of when I first came into my program office, and we didn't have a logo, we didn't have branding, we didn't have a strategic theme. So it took a long time to get those things in order. But once it got in order, and I was able to watch people give presentations, and other people are starting to understand who we are, and they're using our templates, and they're using our colors and logos that I was able to come up with a graphic designer. Just seeing that everywhere, and people starting to refer to us by our new name, and referring to our strategic themes that I came up with, that was really gratifying for me. And I said, okay, well, it took about a year. I thought it was going to take about 3 or 6 months, but now that it's here and now that it's been implemented, it made me feel really satisfied that, okay, all those different checkpoints and all those different people I had asked for permission to get this done, it was very satisfying to actually see that happen. So that's the case, that's my specific example, but I think that's the case in a lot of people's roles, that just stick with it, stay with the plan, keep working at your goals, and eventually you'll see the fruits of your labor.
That is great advice. I feel like sometimes we live in the world of like, okay, well, I can watch Netflix on demand, I can microwave my popcorn, I can order Taco Bell, not even pizza anymore. Like everything is at your fingertips. And so I think that sometimes tricks us into feeling like that's the way the world works when it doesn't.
And I hate to sound, old, because I don't feel like I'm that old, but, I think that the generation that's coming up right now, where they've grown up with that, they've grown up with the app economy, they've grown up with things on demand. I'm still old enough to remember when, if there was a TV show that was going to be on and you missed it, that's
That
it.
was
You
it.
got to wait for that. There's no replay, there's no TiVo, and there's no, no skipping through commercials.
Right.
It's a different experience that, I feel like people who are around our age grew up, that, even we sometimes can be really impatient. But I think that something really important for the generation that's coming into the workplace now to understand, listen, the most of the corporate work world is not going to work on demand. So you have to really kind of adjust those expectations.
That is a great point, that the workplace is not on demand. It's not the same as when you were trying to catch your favorite song on the radio and you put the cassette in and hit record, and you're like, dang, the DJ's still talking over my music. And you it's those experiences are never going to happen for these people. And it kind of makes me a little
Right.
bit sad, but maybe we're just old.
I think we are. I think we're finally there. I think it's safe to say that we might be getting there.
We might be old. Look, okay, today is officially I might be old. 2021. Okay. Uh, I'm sorry, I'm so tickled by the idea that we're old. One of my recent interviewers was somebody who poured out so much wisdom, and I swear this lady, like, when she told me how old she was, I was like, "You're lying!" Like, I would have guessed like at least 20 years less. Like, so
Wow.
the idea of old is now kind of a joke to me. There's no such thing. It's people say you're as old as you feel, so I'm gonna
It's
go
a
with that.
mindset.
Yeah,
Right.
and
Exactly.
she showed me that, and I super enjoyed that conversation. But I don't want to keep you forever, but I do want to ask this one last question. Is there
Sure.
anything that we did not talk about that you would like to share?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this ever since you first asked me, and I would say, to anybody who's watching this, who is just getting started in their career and is trying to gain as many experiences as they can, just continue to keep doing that. Continue to keep learning as much as you can. Put yourself in a position to be able to learn as many new things as you can, even if it's not something that's totally related to what you're doing. You don't think it's going to help you in your career, it might. it's just very important to be somebody who's always curious, who's always well-rounded, who knows about different things and not just the things that they're interested in. Just be a sponge and put yourself in a position where you can learn from different resources like what you're doing, Unika, which I think is so great. Just find mentors, find resources like this, always be listening, always be learning, and good things I think will happen. So I'm so happy that I was able to get the opportunity to come talk to you for something like this, because when I first started on LinkedIn, I first started networking, we didn't have any resources like this. We were kind of just connecting with the coworkers that we already had, and I didn't feel like I was learning anything new. So I think this is just an amazing thing that you're doing. I know it's your labor of love, and I'm glad that I was able to participate in it today.
Well, thank you so much for being a part of this. Like I literally was just like, let me try something new. But I'm excited because every time I talk to people, like I get like the unfolding of the things that I feel like you said were missing earlier in my career as well. It's like I remember starting off and trying to find mentors and figure out what to do. And I had like books, and I'm like reading like the confidence code and all this, all of the it books of the season, and kind of trying to figure it all out. And I think that it's a beautiful thing when we have resources like LinkedIn and people like you, Sylvester, who are willing to come on and have these conversations, so that people who maybe don't have a relative who works at NASA now have access. And so for me, this is an opportunity to level the playing field.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And to that point, I would tell you, anybody who's watching, please connect with me. Please send me a message. I'm happy to answer your questions. I think it's really time for us to start reducing some of those barriers to entry. Put yourself out there. If you're on LinkedIn, you see somebody that you're really impressed by their background and their career, and you want to talk to them, send them an invite to connect. And most of the time that I've done that, particularly over the last year, I've made great connections, and we've had, wonderful conversations just like you and I are having. And I think that's really been a bright spot for me over the last year during this pandemic, is getting to know people and making new connections that I normally wouldn't, on the LinkedIn platform. So I think it's a great resource, and people should continue to have these kind of conversations, even hopefully now that the pandemic's starting to wind down.
Yes. Speaking to your point, you and I connected through one of our mutual connections. She was like, hey, I think you should talk to this person. Do you interview men? And I was like, yeah, I just hadn't yet because I only know a bunch of women. so thank you
I'm so
much.
glad she connected us too, because that was exactly right. She just said, hey, I know the perfect person for you to talk to, Unika and Walkout. And I said, yes, that sounds like a great person I want to talk to. And we scheduled this, and it worked out wonderful. So you just never know the connections and the things that can come out of that request that you're sending to hopefully connect with somebody.
Yeah. Also, you said people can reach out to you. Is the best way to reach out to you on LinkedIn, or should they email you? What is the best way to get in touch with you, Sylvester?
Send me an invite on LinkedIn, and I'll be happy to add you, and we can message or schedule a phone call and answer questions. I'm always happy to do that.
Okay. And so for people that are confused, his last name is Placid. That's Placid.
That's right. Yeah. And I'm probably the only Sylvester Placid who's a communication strategist at NASA. So it shouldn't be too hard to find me.
Sweet. All right. Thank you so much, Sylvester. If you'll hold a moment for me, I'm going to end the broadcast.